thank you for your time once again, Indrek. We would love to directly start asking our questions. First of all, what motivated you and your co-authors to explore blockchain's role in the European film industry at this specific moment?
Well, actually, here in Tallinn University, we have a small team that has been exploring these issues of how media and creative industries can use blockchain technologies in order to create more value, or to be more precise, public value to the wider society. And the public value aspect means that we are interested in how the broader industries, including the small players, etc., including the audiences, can get, let's say, how can we arrive to the kind of more fairer media system where those who actually create value are also remunerated for it more fairly, instead of all the money going to the big platforms, so to speak, but more value going directly back to the creators, as well as, let's say, more dedicated audiences, engaged fans, etc. So that was our initial motivation, and we have been working towards this actually via several papers that we have published in the recent years, but now also this particular report that we carried out through the actually Krishina project, and the Krishina project focuses on how to improve the competitiveness of European film industries by focusing on small countries. And the argument is that if you figure out something for small countries, we figure out something for the Europe as a whole, because Europe mostly consists of small countries. And we're thinking that we can now open up this, how to improve the competitiveness, how to improve the conditions for small players in small countries, also via using the, again, blockchain technologies. And we were interested in investigating what have been the practices in the recent years and what can we learn from those.
What specific challenges in film financing and distribution make blockchain more appealing than other digital innovations for the European market?
Now, blockchains effectively, ideally, are all about decentralization. So effectively, what blockchains really are ledgers that are distributed, that enable accounting of all kinds of, mostly transactions. And if, as they are distributed, this means that they are public, everybody understands what's the system, and you can coordinate also transactions between parties that via some sort of big intermediary. Means that, again, if our team here in Tallinn, we have been interested how to create this, let's say, ideally fairer system where the big platforms are not big rent seekers, then we were interested in how this can be, this potential of decentralization and fairer system, how can this be materialized? Of course, blockchain can be also seen as a new type of let's say, centralizing technology also, as the practice has, there have been signs of this as well, of course, because those who have been able to, gain advantage or gain access to some, let's say, crypto tokens, etc., have been collecting, significant wealth, arrived at significant wealth, and this can be seen that they start then dominate some specific blockchains, and there's not so clear how the decentralization tendencies or potential, at least, hasn't always materialized, maybe. But at least what our interest has been always to figure out if there's the claim of decentralization here is there, potential of fairer system is there, and what we have been interested in, how can this be arrived really? Yeah.
And the report positions smallness as both a challenge and an opportunity for European film. How does blockchain technology specifically address the vulnerabilities of small, fragmented markets compared to the large ones like US?
Yeah, no, I think the answer here is not very clear, but our presumption has been that because small players in small countries are rather incapacitated, you know, the big intermediaries in the film market, be them big distributors, be them big, I don't know, cinema chains, platforms, are not even really aware of, you know, small productions in small countries. The information about those productions doesn't really arrive. Big audiences, big players do so easily. But probably today, later, we will discuss a lot about generally what the data systems are and why they are maybe not always serving the small players super well. But we see, yeah, that blockchains, if it's all about decentralization and kind of uncontrolled flow of data as well as resources, this has potential for small players, meaning that if the data systems are good, you can also find your audiences maybe easily, or your audiences can find your films more easily, perhaps. Yeah, so directly in the internet, so to speak. And so the blockchain potential really goes hand in hand with the very good data systems in general. So availability of data, of films that are available, films that are not stuck. Because some of the problem with the film markets is that the way how the deals have been made up until this day has been so kind of dependent on the various kinds of distribution and sales deals, and these deals have been made often for years and years, and the film rights are sitting in the hands of certain distributors, certain sales agents for a long while, and it is only their decisions how the films are being marketed or distributed across the world. And in some sense, it serves the purpose very well, because the distributor then is interested to, you know, put in effort to market those films here and there. But not always, because they are also sitting on top of, you know, large portfolios of films. They have their own strategies. They may not always prioritize, you know, the promotion of certain films. They may actually hold them back. Films may sit for years in certain catalogs, not promoted, not accessible to anybody. So if the data systems can be created that are really built on the, let's say, internet logic of films being available, films being, you know, certain kinds of films being findable, and finding their specific potential audiences quickly, and the audiences can pay directly to the filmmakers or rights holders, at least as a potential for extra revenue, yeah, and especially perhaps even new kind of dynamic can emerge out of from this, that probably we will discuss later on, that filmmakers, you know, really work with their audiences, really create their communities of fans or supporters. And these kinds of blockchain-based infrastructures where immediate or direct relationship can be established between filmmakers and their audiences, it doesn't need to necessarily replace the existing ways of distribution and promotion, etc., but at least can be perhaps something extra that starts gradually evolving. And I think the blockchain-based infrastructures, data infrastructures, has the potential to start building this kind of alternative system that in some sense sometimes can be actually more effective than the, let's say, the legacy system of distribution. Yeah.
Your research identified around 20 relevant companies, but some had ceased operation. What were the most common reasons for failure among blockchain for film startups?
Yeah, so in our report, we were interested in, you know, existing initiatives, existing firms that are doing something in this space of blockchain-based film technology innovation in this area. And yes, as you said, we identified 20 companies that have been done, that are trying to do something more significant in this space. And yes, as you already said, at least 10 of them are not really more functioning anymore. And actually, of the 10 or dozen companies that we studied, most of them may not actually use blockchain technology fully, or have put this on hold. So why? Because I would say two reasons. One reason is that blockchain technology itself is still felt as too complicated for ordinary consumers. Most people don't have direct experience of that. Of course, quite a significant portion of, let's say, Western and maybe probably global consumers by now have some encounters with cryptocurrencies and such, but maybe they do it via these centralized crypto exchange platforms, etc. They may really not know how easy to really have their own crypto wallet that is decentralized and such, and dealing with, let's say, more complex assets such as NFTs or such. So our respondents saw that crypto technology itself is not always so familiar. It's a bit complex. The interfaces are perhaps too hard to manage or too hard to understand, etc. And maybe the crypto technology itself is not ready for this wider consumer uptake. Personally, I think that this is maybe not necessary. It is a little bit of I'm not sure. I'm not entirely convinced, but at least this has been the perception. But I would say that actually more important aspect here is still the underlying data infrastructures. I mean, in the Krishina project as a whole, the other thing that I'm doing, we are building up a big data pool about market data, about European and global film market data. We have more of data about European markets, but actually we have quite significant data about overall global film markets, data about those markets. And we have to say that we are trying to build this database where we integrate data from different sources, and it has been really, really hard because there's no established standards, like identifiers for films or filmmakers, etc., that would make integration of this data easy and straightforward. These standards are about to emerge right now. These bigger, larger databases are also worked towards. Our initiative is one of those. But really, for anything crypto-based, anything decentralized to emerge, it really presumes that we have really good standards about data. Data about films, data about ownerships, data about people, be them filmmakers, production companies, etc., so that all participants in the market are easily identifiable, because you need this before any sort of blockchain-based transactions. Yeah, you need to have very good understanding what the assets are, who the actors are, them being always identifiable, so that, because what blockchain enables really is these automated transactions. Yeah, you need to create these automated workflows, and if you don't have these very good data systems, data infrastructures, data standards, the identifiers, etc., it's very difficult to automate anything. Yeah, because what really is needed to make, let's say, European companies from small markets more competitive is this presumption of automation. The data flows are easy, everything's recognizable, fans can identify anything, anybody who can purchase a film license or distribution license on different platforms, be it be it for showing in cinemas, be it showing on a little reel on some social media, etc. You always need to have very good understanding of rights, make the transactions as easy as possible. Because the problem currently in the market is transactions are hard. You need to have negotiations between different partners, every partner being identified, etc., etc. This is very, very labor-intensive process. And in the internet economy, we need much to really facilitate this kind of cross-platform flows of information, using snippets of data, snippets of film, snippets of music. You need to have a really much improved data system. And so yeah, we see that, I already forgot what the question was, but the problem is that before we do anything, these automated blockchain-based workflows, transactions, etc., we need this very core, very good quality data systems underneath. And this is the main bottleneck right now.
And in your view, which approach is more critical to build first? I mean, you already touched a lot of topics around this, but the standardized data infrastructure, or you think the marketplace that creates demand for it, which one is more critical for it?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question. And how to put it? I think the market demand there is already there. I mean, everybody would like to more easily access film. One of the biggest concerns in film consumption is that 90% of films are not accessible. Yeah, so films are being made and nobody knows how to access them. Oh yes, these days we have these platforms such as Just Watch or Play Pilot or a few others that are all about finding you're interested. Let's say you tell me about the film you liked, and I would also like to watch it here in Estonia. You're in Turkey, so my question is, how can I here in Estonia watch this film? And then I start Googling and I find it maybe on this Turkish platform or wherever, and then I cannot watch it. Yeah, so because films are distributed territory by territory and rights are territorial. Yeah.
Yes.
Mostly in EU, it's a little bit gray area, but mostly this is how it is. Now, what to do? Yeah, so the demand would be already there. Yeah, I want to see films, but I cannot. Or I want to, let's say, use a snippet of your film in my YouTube mix of films, yeah, or I want to review film and I want to use part of your film or something, or I want to use music or some sounds from your film to create my new musical piece. So the demands are there, but we have these legacy systems of rights management, of rights trade, etc., of data systems that make these reusing, using, distribution, watching, consuming very hard. So we don't really know anything about the demand because there's so many bottlenecks, so many restrictions. Yeah, and of course, let's say there have been over the years all kinds of copyleft advocates saying exactly that we need new systems because the current systems are just too restrictive. Creative industries cannot operate freely. Innovation cannot be there because all these restrictions. Blockchain-based systems enable this, that we don't need, in some sense, always copyleft. You don't need to give your assets, your productions, your creations away just completely for free. You can get some money back, but at least you need to make them accessible. Yeah. These data systems are accessible. It is easy to buy licenses, easy to buy rights for any further work on your creations, etc. So, and this is why I think blockchains are still highly these blockchain-based systems are useful because they create this, potentially at least, these systems where creators can get remunerations, they can get fans, they can create direct relationships with the audiences, consumers worldwide. So So yeah, but to answer your question, we need to really work on these data infrastructures first. And in the report, we also cover what, at least in the EU context, what are these different initiatives that work towards that. I mean, Data Governance Act is exactly creating these, so to speak, they have foreseen the emergence of, so to speak, neutral intermediaries called DISPs, and we see that in the area of creative industries and rights management, these kinds of public-private neutral intermediaries could emerge. And if something, these infrastructures, these neutral intermediaries that are quite free to use to most partners, they don't take fees, then this, proper controlled data infrastructures that are also kind of blockchain ready would enable these marketplaces that, where the demand then can potentially flourish on. I'm also relying here on the thinking of institutional economics, also theorists such as Mariana Mazzucato, etc., where let's say public agencies or semi-public agencies are important in order to they can do some important work in order to create markets. And we see that this public involvement of creating these databases of rights, copyright databases where make it very clear who owns what, etc., and facilitate this easier automated licensing, etc. This is necessary for markets really to emerge, and so we need to first work towards creating these infrastructures, and these probably can satisfy the demand and create new markets and new phases of innovation when it comes to really opening up the potential for new ways of distribution and new ways of using existing creations for innovating new artistic forms, etc. So yeah, that's my answer.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. About the watch and earn model that redistributes revenue to viewers, like beyond the novelty, what do you think the long-term value proposition for a platform like this to compete with the content libraries and marketing power of Netflix or YouTube?
Yeah, so in the report we cover the case of Myco, that is a big such platform operating in Asia. And Asia is probably also significant here because, let's say, Netflix and YouTube are less established there slightly. What needs to be mentioned here that a couple of years ago, we also studied two of such streaming platforms that were blockchain-based. One was Theta TV and the other was something called Library. And both of these platforms do not exist anymore, although I haven't checked on Library for a while now. And they were very specific cases. They changed their business models, etc. But we explored them closely. And what we saw is that they were really, their models were very interesting because they were really rewarding. They were really good at creating communities. So creators, streamers of various kinds in those cases were really good at creating the communities of other streamers or fans around them, tight-knit communities where they kind of were mutually rewarding each other. I mean, the fans were rewarding the makers, and the audiences who put in this kind of labor of watching, labor of engaging with artists, were also rewarded for their activity. I'm not going to go into the particular business models, what they had. The platform earned money actually for the Theta TV, for instance, earned money by actually not so much from advertising, but facilitating, how to put it, streaming flows in the internet, making streaming more cheaper for all kinds of players.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, infrastructure payments for enabling alternative routes for streaming. Yeah, it's a little bit complex to explain here right now very quickly, but the point was that on this surface level platform, Theta TV, what we saw there, like comparing to, let's say, YouTube, etc., or Twitch, was that we saw a much more closer, tight-knit community feeling, because everybody was invested in some sense, because everybody was rewarded and everybody was invested as well. So you get remunerated for your work, and you can use these tokens, etc., for kind of rewarding for your co-travelers, so to speak, other creators, your fans, etc., etc. So theoretically, we established that these kind of blockchain-based systems are really good at, how to put it, creating for communities, because everybody feels that their investment, being them time or labor or literally money, are rewarded, and their work goes into this kind of community building. It creates the value of that community. And if the value of that community or that platform increases, eventually, if the token also increases in value, everybody gradually gets awarded. They are personally really invested in this, invested in the broader sense of the term. And I think the Myco example now, going back to that Myco example, this platform in Asia, in a way works in a very similar way. That the audiences, they are also rewarded. Myco gets its money from advertising, facilitating. Advertising is there on the platform, and also audiences get rewarded some of that money in the platform tokens, because they are put into work into this. Their labor is watching and engaging, etc., etc. So again, the dynamic is quite similar what it was in case of Theta TV or something a couple of years ago. Of course, let's be honest, we don't know if it's sustainable, because Theta TV also, it was very kind of rewarding, also literally in monetary sense, when we had few years ago this rise of the value of NFTs, and before the crypto market crashed, there was significant value. There some creators could really make a living also on Theta TV. Then the crypto markets crashed, and the tokens lost value, and it wasn't really beneficial anymore, and eventually this whole platform changed their model. Now, in case of Myco, we also see that we don't know, or at least we can question how long-term feasible it is. But at least for us as researchers, we see that it creates a different kind of dynamic, this kind of investment, feeling part of the community. Everybody sees that there is certain extra value in their interactions, extra dedication. And I guess over time we will see where it leads us. But this Myco example at least is promising, because it works there in Asia, where there's not so many alternatives, or alternatives there, but let's say people are not don't want to pay for Netflix or for certain reasons, and certain alternative models is tested. And it will be interesting to see how this will evolve over the next few years. If it continues evolving here, at least in Europe, we may get inspired and try to work towards similar models.
And another case study was Calladita, I think, is a landmark example of the NFT financing. So what was the single most important factor in this success, and how replicable is that the model for the average independent European filmmaker today, or global?
Answering this, I can maybe continue this emphasis on the community, because this Calladita filmmaker, he was already, what made this case special was that he was, yes, a filmmaker, engaged in in the community of filmmakers, but also was invested or part of that Web3 community a few years back when this community was really active and before the crypto crash, etc. So he had this credibility. He had credibility in this Web3 community already. So he could, let's say, sell his NFTs, etc., based on that reputation. So any average filmmaker right now, it would be harder to replicate that success simply because they don't have that community. They don't have that credibility in the Web3 community necessarily. And also the crypto assets are not flying that well right now necessarily. But I wouldn't say that it's entirely hopeless. I would say that, but back then when Calladita was made, there were less of these turnkey solutions for how to finance your creative project with the NFT sales and NFT, fractionized ownership of any kind of cultural asset. Yeah. So right now, there are more of these turnkey solutions out there. Filmmakers can turn to these solutions, but at the same time, I would say that this necessity to work with your audiences, work with your community, whatever it is. In the Calladita case, it was the Web3 community. I think right now it can be any community in the internet, but you would need that community first. You would need to have certain credibility or openness, or your supporters out there, or you need to be a really bigger name. Yeah, you need to be Martin Scorsese. I'm sure in his case, many people would be interested in buying his NFTs. But let's just say, if I would be an average Estonian filmmaker right now, depends. I would probably need, Estonia is too small a country. I would need to have certain international reputation, or I would really need to, work with the community here in Estonia, do some explaining. So this kind of, if you want to be this internet-based filmmaker, this means also rather different dynamic. It's not like in making art house films up until now in Estonia. You only need to convince the little community of decision maker in a film institute who gives out public funds, but you would really need to work with the existing communities, existing people out there. You really need to be thinking about your fans, your supporter, your community, and this means different kinds of labor entirely. Yeah, but it's doable. I would say that nothing is impossible. It just means different kind of work.
The report mentions that profit sharing with token holders was illegal in Spain without financial institution. Given this, what do you think is the most immediate regulatory change needed at the EU level?
Yes, we briefly discussed this in a report as well. But the problem is that in European Union there is already this new regulation called MiCA, regulating the crypto asset, and it seems that I'm not a lawyer in this area, so I don't really know, but the current suggestion is that the MiCA regulation needs to be extended a little, so that sort of lightweight licensing regime for, let's say, crowdfunding of cultural assets becomes legally regulated, legally defined, so that if you do this, you don't need to go to this heavy securities regulation where you need to get banks involved, etc., etc. And in this case, these kinds of endeavors would get so expensive, so big that it's not manageable if you're let's say a small filmmaker, I don't know, Estonia, Ireland, or whatever small country in Europe. So we need this new regulation where this kind of fractionalized ownership of cultural assets becomes possible, that you can sell these NFTs effectively that enable that, these tokenized revenue sharing models. And I would say my sense is that the readiness to do this on the EU level is there. It just work needs to go into that, and then. But I assume the work towards that actually is in place and is ongoing. And once this is in place, this would be also this kind of fractionalized, tokenized sales of, part ownership of cultural assets would become possible. Hopefully in the next couple of years.
And our last question is like looking at the emerging innovation ecosystem you described already, which layer do you think will see the most significant adoption and impact in the near future? Do you think it's foundational data, financial management, or consumer distribution?
In some sense, there is quite a bit of take-up already when it comes to, let's say, financial management of certain revenue flows. There is a company called Film Chain in London that does that for bigger projects. They already have this special agreement with Eurimage, which is the big Europe-based funding body for films. And there's Block Frames, a company in France that does this effectively for smaller companies. So these initiatives are already in place and quite functional. But I would say that everything will change once we have this kind of, as I've been already arguing during our interview, that if we get in place this improved data infrastructures, then this would enable so much more. And this is necessary for not only necessary for blockchain-based solutions, but any kind of improved transactions, improved visibility, new wave of innovation when it comes to film distribution, film showing, film watching. So, and not also other creative industries. It's not specific to film. So if we get this, let's say, open data infrastructures, open standards in place, here Europe could have a leading role. And of course, EU is well known internationally. There's a lot of history in Europe being good standardizer. And this, because of its internal market, it's also quite significant market. And if it standardizes things away for its internal market, other global markets can follow this. But I have to say that actually here, in some sense, Europe and US can collaborate because there is a lot of very nice set of standards out there coming from an NGO called Movie Labs, which operates out of the US. And their standards are actually such as identifier EIDR, identifier for film. There is a new identifier, new initiative called HAND, which is identifier for filmmakers and even internet identities such as avatars, or like assets such as artistic persons, or how to say, I don't know how to put it exactly, but so yeah. So if we can get these open standards, certain agreements around those, then I think, and put them also in use to literally de facto adopted by significant institutions, then we would start to be in a better place. Yes. So everything would be facilitated or to get this data standardization figured out and adopted, and so then it would be very good.
Thank you so much. That was all our questions. Thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Have a nice
day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.